𝗪𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 how you got started on this journey. Could you tell us that backstory as well as kind of who you are and what you're about now?
Sure. How far back do you want to go? Childhood?
Yes. I heard you once at least discuss what happened to you and that took you on leaving your home, and it's fascinating.
Let's give you the short version. I had quite an abusive upbringing. Everyone knows that. Alcoholic father, abusive father. He broke a few bones on me before I was 9 years old with his boots. Obviously, at that point, you start to think, what's wrong here? What have I done? Is this my fault? Where is this coming from? Is this life? Does everyone live like this? I didn't know. But after a while, obviously, you start to talk to the kids at school. I wasn't one to hide these things at school, but for a while, I thought everyone was living the same life, so I didn't say anything. After visiting a few friends at their homes and seeing their loving parents, hugging them when they got home from school and what have you, I started to realize that there was something a little bit wrong. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I eventually ended up meeting up with a Kung Fu teacher. He came over from China and he was doing an exhibition. I guess I was quite rude. I pushed my way to the front and I talked to him, and he saw something in me that he wanted to work with. At the age of 14, he called up my parents on the phone and he said, I've met your son and I think we can do a lot with him. He has a lot of potential. Would you be interested in him coming to stay with me and my family, and I will instruct him in Kung Fu and Chinese philosophy? And my parents said, sure, take him. So I never actually went home from that phone call. I just left with my Kung Fu teacher. No problem for my family, apparently. His father, by the way, was a member of the Tong. He was a hitman, I believe, from the Tong, the triads in China. And his father was excellent. He had iron palm, iron shirt. He was... he's about 75 years old when I met him, and he was rock hard, and that just blew me out of the water. Of course, at this point, Bruce Lee is on the screen. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, here we go. I've got my chance to be Bruce Lee. I spent a year or so with him. The reason I brought the Tong guy up is, which I find really interesting, you don't leave the triads, that you die, basically. But he was so well respected, they let him leave without killing him, but they did take his face off with acid. They threw acid in his face. He's got no face now, so he can't be linked to anybody. And he had this tiny little hole left where he could see through, and that hole is what he taught me through. And that's how I got to know him, peeking through that hole. After a short while, he basically said, I'm sorry, Little Wolf is what they called me. I'm sorry, Little Wolf, but you are broken on the inside and I'm hitting a barrier. So he gave me a letter of introduction, put it in a silver tube, handed me that, bought a ticket and sent me to the Himalayas. And I met a Sherpa in Nepal who was waiting for me, and he took me up into the Himalayas in Tibet and dropped me off at the gate. And I sat there for 2 weeks before they would answer. A few passers-by, children would come by with leaves filled up with berries, and they would just, that's what I was eating while I was waiting. And they just kept saying, wait, don't leave, just wait. 2 weeks later, the gate opened up. I thought I was going to have to sit there and say my piece and get my way in, but the gate opened up and this monk's arm just came out and grabbed me and pulled me in. I was only 14 years old and I was a scrawny little thing, so it was easy to do. I very quickly realized and found out that it wasn't a Buddhist monastery, believe it or not. It was a mystical monastery only, no religion involved, just the practices of mind control, enlightenment, and all of those kinds of things, which was good. I don't know if my teacher put that in the letter of introduction or not, or if he organized it, but that's what eventually happened. So the magic was already working for me. I spent 18 years there. People don't realize this in the West, but the original and still underlying spirituality in Tibet is extraterrestrial in nature. They have no problems knowing and understanding that their ancestors came from the sky, and they still think that they live there in the Himalayas somewhere inside a hollowed out mountain, but that's another story. So a bunch of us went to a meeting in 𝗪𝗪𝗃, which is a huge monastery in Lhasa. And these were all mystical monks from different mystical monasteries from around the Himalayas. And we were there to talk about these old original teachings outside of religion. Transmission of mind beyond the teachings. While we were there, we were attacked by a whole bunch of Chinese people dressed up as Tibetan policemen, and they murdered 12 people in front of us right there in the monastery. A handful of people, 3 of us from my monastery, was left alive. They tried to hang me. They put a noose around my neck. They were throwing monks off the roof. I was on the roof, and they put a noose around my neck. And the guy was tying it off, and before he had time to tie it off, 2 soldiers or whatever they were threw me off the roof, but it wasn't tied off, so I hit the ground and broke a couple of bones, but I wasn't hung, and that was a good thing. So out of the 3 of us that was left, one of them was my teacher at the time, he got me through that. So they took us and tortured us for about 5 days, trying to get us to denounce the Dalai Lama and denounce this and denounce that. And we didn't, of course. And then the British consulate came in and saved us. So I went back to Australia, and I took which is where I met my Kung Fu teacher. And I took my teacher with me from the Himalayas. And while we were sitting there in a place called Darwin, right at the very top of Australia, he was saying to me, you know, little wolf, if you have any anger in you from what's happened or revengeful thoughts or anything of that nature, you've wasted the whole 18 years that you've been studying with us. And I didn't have any of those feelings, but I wasn't sure. So once we'd convalesced, we sent my teacher back to where he came from, and I went to China and joined a monastery there and learned Kung Fu. You know, it's called 𝗪𝗟 Monastery, and it was in the Hunan province on a mountain called 𝗪𝗂𝗛𝗯𝗀𝗃 Mountain, which is a very mystical mountain. It's quite famous in China. Most people over there have heard of it. And that's it, really. So I learned all about mind and body and spirit in Tibet, and in China, I learned about Qigong and meridians and acupuncture and correct breathing, all of that kind of thing. And then I went back to Australia for a little while, opened up my own school, and then just traveled the world, not on my own volition, but it was just what happened. People wanted me to come here, wanted me to come there, and I just followed that. And that's it, really. That's all I've done. And here we are. Yeah. I'm talking to you.
And it's led you to this point. That is an unbelievable story, truly.